joining us here at Queer at Heart, everyone. Today on the show, we have Myles Sexton. Hey, Myles.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So, for those who do not know you, you are a fashion nomad. Well, those who do know you as well, fashion nomad, content curator, makeup artist, who came to Toronto in 2009 from Nova Scotia.
Yeah, I literally moved here on my 19th birthday.
Yeah, your 19th birthday.
Yeah.
So, today's topic is we are going to be talking about you coming out with your HIV status and the importance of it for you and for everybody. The importance of coming out and removing that stigma and how it's affected your life and in fashion as well. So, what when did your journey start in fashion? When was that spark that just sort of start with
that's
that
a good
first?
question. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a super small town in Nova Scotia, and it's one of those towns where like the population is like probably under 2,000 people, and I didn't grow up with like a super, my family wasn't super wealthy, so like we didn't really have a lot of access to like the internet or a ton of like television shows. So I guess I just like didn't really have much exposure to the fashion industry or just like society in general. I really only had like I guess my local community as like a reference point for what people were like.
Right.
And so as I got older, I think I must have been like maybe 15 or so, and I started working at a grocery store, and 15 or 16, and I remember like I was hating it because they were like making me push carts like from outside in, but I was like, this is getting a little like pretty blonde boy that like was like I want to do something else. And then like the woman who took care of like the magazines, she like ended up getting promotion or something, and I was like, I want to do that. So like once a month or like once every 2 weeks, I got to like take all the old magazines and put the new ones out.
Oh.
And so it was like, because I could never like afford to buy a magazine really before or like spend my money on it. So it was like I was kind of able to like look through them as I was, putting them in and out off the shelf. And I just remember being like so inspired by like the creativity that was inside of it that I was like, oh, this is so interesting. Like I want to be in these magazines. Like I don't see myself in these magazines, but like why not? Like I'm like I want to like creatively express myself with this like fantasy that I'm seeing in these fashion magazines. So through that, I decided to no longer be a geologist and decided to like chase the world of fashion.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you did it. You know what I mean?
Me too.
I'm so happy you did. So, I guess we've been following each other on Instagram for maybe like 8 months, 9 months.
Yeah, must be now.
Right? And I was watching, I got to know you through your Instagram, and of course we become friends, and you're such a good. I feel like you've got the light,
Oh.
like you've got the light, and so you're so good for the industry because I feel like it's the attitude that the industry needs more of. Is that
Totally agree.
that holistic kind of, just you're very a salt of the earth kind of person, like very pure, kind, fashionable, all the things that people love. So
Well, and that's like one of the things that I always hated about the beauty and like fashion industry is that everyone's like, oh, it's so fake, it's so artificial, it's like nothing's real, everyone's just like out for themselves. And I'm like, that always bothered me because I think that there's so many amazing individuals who also work in the industry, but it's like you can't just like paint the industry with like a few bad apples,
Right.
that are there. So I guess I just always thought it was really important to like, yeah, obviously like my Instagram and everything is like super curated, but it's like still like having those like kind of like more grounded conversations and open and vulnerable conversations as well at the same time. It's like not just I guess like pretty pictures.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like show another side of the fashion industry, I suppose.
Well, and and you're doing that, and I noticed a couple of, well, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe about 3 weeks ago.
Must be 3 now.
You came out and you started talking about your HIV status more. And no, what that's kind of exciting. I was really excited for you.
Thank you.
You know, because like fashion, you do it so beautifully, and like you also, you know, when you see these curated photos, well, you know, fashion is visual, you know, and it's beautiful things, and I love that you start to get really personal, because I think that's another thing we need in fashion is people to get really personal about their lives and say, you know, this is my real life, this is what's really happening. Let's all let our bellies out here. You know?
Exactly.
So, when were you diagnosed?
It was, like, I think it'll be almost 3 years this fall. I actually need to ask my specialist again, because I, like, mix my sobriety date and, like, my diagnosis, the day I was diagnosed, like, date up all the time. So I'm, like, have to see her soon, and I need to ask her, like, what it says in the records, because I actually forget, which is so bad.
Yeah, because you treat it like a birthday.
Totally. Like, I think it's February, but I'm, like, I don't know. I like, keep discussing with my close friends. I'm like, when did I tell you? I'm like, yeah, we've been trying to figure it out.
So, what was that feeling when you found out? Like, what I like, you know, I want people to know, because, you know, what was that feeling for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was overwhelming. I was, like, literally in the middle of, like, teaching a class, and I got, like, a phone call, and, like, my class had the class with the students had, like, just ended, and so I, like, took the phone call, and it was, like, a doctor, and, like, I had gone to a walk-in clinic, and he was just like, hey, Myles, like, your test results came back and you're HIV positive. And I was just like, I just felt like someone, like, punched me in the throat. Like, I didn't know what to do. I literally, like, grabbed my things, and I, like, went, because I still had, like, maybe 3 or 4 hours left of my shift. And I grabbed my things, and I just, like, said to the manager, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, there's been an emergency and I need to leave. And I just, like, got in my car, and I just, like, remember just started crying so hard. Like, I don't know. It's just, like, I knew nothing about HIV. I really didn't, you know? And it's, like, I'd only really known it from the few, like maybe, like, queer films where it was, like, talked about, and so it's just, like, you know, everything that I'd kind of seen prior was that, like, HIV is a death sentence. And so just, I think being faced with the reality of, like, me thinking that I was gonna die was, like, super terrifying and scary. And, you know, I was maybe, like, an hour and a half from my home, and I was like, how am I even gonna drive home? And yeah, it was a lot. It was, like, definitely, like, a whirlwind of emotions, like, in that moment of just losing my immortality, I felt.
Yeah, especially, you know, I can only imagine, you know, not being educated on what just happened. You know, like, oh my God, what is this? Like, am I gonna die? And then you did you learn right away? Did the doctors, like, filling you in on what this is, and that's actually not that big of a deal anymore, and you can take the meds, and it is a big deal, obviously, mentally initially. Yes. But, like, how did that feel for you? How'd you go about that?
Yeah, like, I had to wait about a month to see a specialist, which was really daunting. Like, I think because I just felt like I tried to look at the internet and, like, to get information, but I think kind of how I learn, I wasn't really able to find a lot of those, like, resources. You know, like, a lot of people sharing stories online about their, like, HIV status was, like, people who were diagnosed with AIDS. But, like, I didn't know. So, like, all I was watching was these videos of people talking about themselves, like, dying. And it was, like, you know, so that's just, like, what I thought that I had. So it was just, yeah, it was really hard, like, in that first little moment. And then, you know, I remember going to see my specialist, like, going to see, like, the specialist at St. Michael's. And it was, like, you know, my first appointment, and, like, kind of, like, finding out about this medication then there, like, a month later, and, like, being like, you know, you're not going to die, and, like, this is not, like, something that people die from. And I was just, like, you know, so relieved, but also just, like, I had gone through this, like, month-long, like, the hardest, like, mental battle that I've ever had to face of, like, just feeling like I didn't live my life enough. And, like, I'm like, I have so many regrets. Like, I was just, like, pouring myself into, like, my work and, like, not actually enjoying life. And so it just, like, made me reflect, I think, a lot in those moments. But, and obviously, I think after I've been really, like, trying to educate myself so much now on it, and to, like, get myself to a point where I could be, like, super comfortable with publicly talking about it.
Yeah. And what was it that sort of um, sort of sparked you 3 weeks ago to get more open about it? What was it? Was there something? Did you feel responsibility to remove stigma, or what was it?
I think there's a lot of pieces that kind of all came together. When I felt like for the last few years, kind of like a topic that I've been really like trying to focus on is vulnerability, and I just feel that, like I grew up with a family that like, they talked a bit about emotions, but like not a ton. And like, I just feel like we live in a society where like people don't open up, and like being vulnerable is like, I think we were raised a lot of the time that like emotions are bad and like you don't tell people your feelings. And I just was really trying to like remove that old ways of like of what I've kind of like created mentally in my head. And I think even just like with my friendships and like my family, that I just like I needed to like let that go. I needed to be more vulnerable, and it was sort of something that I wanted. I've been trying to put into practice and like really reading a lot of books on it. I'm like obsessed with Brene Brown, if you've ever read any of her books.
Yeah.
And so I think like after I kind of gone on this like vulnerability journey of like trying to like create daily practices of being vulnerable with people, that I just felt that my HIV status was like a part of that. It's just like me being open and honest about this is just like holding myself accountable to like being vulnerable. But also like, I think it was just really important to like get rid of, I think, the shame and the stigma that I had within myself too. I think that was such a wall. Like for 2 years, I just felt like I held myself back from anything in life because I was just so afraid that if I like even try to like be like an inch forward in my life, or I tried to chase something else in my life, that something else horrible was going to happen. And I was just like, I didn't want to feel any pain. And I think like by not publicly talking about my status, that it was just like I was caging myself in with this like secret that I felt like I had, and I needed to like give away its power. I didn't want it to have any more power over me, and I just like I needed to like let go of that shame and really just try to like fight, I think, this stigma, because the stigma very much exists. Like, okay, yes, HIV is not a death sentence anymore, but like myself in the beginning, I think that the general population still thinks that people die of HIV, and they don't know about the new medications. And like I think sometimes like as a queer person, we think that like everyone knows, but like I generally work with like mostly like heterosexual women, and I think from posting the video, even now, just like so many of them reaching out and saying how much my video just educated them on like the updates of like modern medicine and like HIV, like that makes me so happy. And so yeah, so I really felt like that was, the video was like kind of the first step on like kind of this new journey of trying to like maybe create more awareness and education that to people that like myself that wasn't able to like really access it before or wasn't exposed to it.
Good, because it's exactly what we need, is people to to have that, to inform themselves and to have that kind of knowledge, because the more knowledge that people have, the less isolated we feel.
Absolutely.
Right? And so like that's actually a reason why I started this show, is because when I had come back from Southeast Asia, when I was away for a year, I went out and had a drink with a friend, and there was a guy at the bar who was talking to me about how he would never date somebody with HIV. And I said, well, how come? Like, it seems stupid that you would actually not date somebody. It seems really dumb. I was like, do you know it's undetectable, right? Like, you understand that you cannot catch. Like, I said to him, you have a better chance of a piano falling from the sky and hitting you on the head than you ever catching HIV from somebody with HIV. He's like, what do you mean? So I kind of just left the conversation, and I thought to myself, there is so much work for us to do, because, and it's our responsibility, like people who don't have HIV, people who do have HIV, to educate each other on, on modern information.
Totally.
On what is really happening here. So I knew at that point, I was like, okay, there's so much here, so much work to do, you know, as far as gay men and their internalized phobia and transphobia and just how we function as gay, queer males. And so that's how I started this. And so I just felt I had that responsibility, you know, and I'm so happy I did because now I have you on the show and, you know, people get to talk about their own personal stories.
And I have to say that, like, you know, still to this day, I know very few people who have HIV, you know, and I don't have anyone in my, like, immediate friends group or, like, even just someone, like, I have one person that I can kind of have a little bit of conversation with about HIV with, but I still have, like, yet to kind of, like, find my community with people living with HIV. But I have to say that your podcast really, I remember when we connected on social media and then I started listening to all of your podcasts and it was just, like, felt like in a way, like, you became, like, this kind of, like, person that was, like, educating me a lot on HIV because you were sharing so many people's stories, you know, that were living with HIV. And it was like I wasn't out about it and we hadn't even really talked about it. But it was like, it made me feel so much less alone. So I really have to also thank you for that because it really, like, I enjoyed hearing all these different people's stories so much. And it gave me, like, a bit of kind of someone to connect to. So.
Oh my God! Actually, I'm gonna cry. You know, because like you know that. Oh my God! Yeah, I'm getting a little emotional because when I hear that, it makes everything and every bit of work that I do so worth it. You know, whether it's one person or 1,000 people, or whether it's, you know, whatever amount of people it sort of touches. You know, that's like most important. So thank you so much for saying that.
Of course. Thanks you for giving me a part of my confidence to, like, get to where I am today. Your podcast definitely has helped me a lot. So
yeah, well, you're welcome. So in fashion, how is that? Like when you were people weirded out in fashion? Do you find that people in fashion are more educated than the average person about HIV, or did you find it was the opposite, or how did you find that?
I guess because of COVID, I haven't really been able to, like, attend anything or do anything, you know, with my community. Like, I think my community has gotten hit in one of the hardest. Like, I feel like everything's really just still on pause because like people can't really be creative right now, like with big groups of people, you know, and no fashion week or anything like that. So I think though that it's very interesting when I, like, look back at, like, the comments and who kind of, like, responded to the video. It was so much, like, of not my community, which was really interesting. And like I said, when I looked at it, I think the percentages, it was like 60 something percent of it was women who responded to my video. And so I found that kind of interesting, you know, like, I feel like I really, like, I touched this whole other demographic of my following that, you know, I think maybe follows me because of how fashionable I am, but, like, was able to kind of, like, connect with them on this whole new vulnerable level. But I feel like the community itself, like, yes, there was definitely, like, some people from the fashion community that reached out and, like, commented or whatever, but I was like, honestly, I was very surprised, like, how I think I just expected maybe, like, more people to kind of, like, reach out and from the fashion industry that didn't. So yeah, and even just the gay community, I felt like it was very the support. There wasn't a lot of support there. It was like it was the community that I was the most worried about. That was the most supportive. So I thought that was interesting.
Huh.
Yeah.
Family.
Oh, I mean, so it's so funny. So you're gonna laugh at this. So when I came out to I came out to my mom last year, last summer, and I remember when I told her, she literally, her response was like, "What's HIV?" Like, she didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my God!" I, like, built this, like, up in my head that, like, it was gonna be this, like, you know, movie scene moment. And she's like, "What is it?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" I literally was like, I was like the epitome of, like, the facepalm emoji in that moment. I was like, "You gotta be kidding me, right?
Yeah.
Like, you lived through the 80s. Like, how do you not know what it even is?" And anyway, but it was, like, very, very fine. Like I had to kind of just like educate her on what it was, but like kind of because I was able to paint my own picture of like what HIV was, she was like, oh, okay, so you just like take a pill and like that's no big deal. So, but like the funniest part, 'cause I don't want to forget to tell you this. It's hilarious because my mom will like call me sometimes and she'll be like, "Hi, Myles, how's the AIDS?" And I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
"Mom, you can't say that." I was like, "I have HIV. It's totally different." She's like, "Oh right, I have to forget. Like I need to write that down." And I'm like, my mother's
Your mom is hilarious.
She is so funny. She needs her own
How is
reality
the
show.
AIDS?
Literally, I'm like, it's so bad. But honestly, I didn't really come out to any of my other family until like the day or hours before my video went live. I feel like I keep my family at a distance that's like safe for me, you know? And I think I like left this small town and came to Toronto and I've been here for 10 years and it's like I just kind of created I think my own chosen family and it's not to say that I don't like love and care about my family. I do. They're their own people, you know, but I think like what my needs are don't often get met, unfortunately. You know, I think sometimes by my family and like, you know, and they try in their own ways, but it's, you know, I think it's hard for them to understand my life, you know? So it was just sort of like, oh, okay, I need to tell them and I need to have this conversation. But I guess it just like, it wasn't super important to me personally to like, to really tell them prior because I felt like the people that were closest to me were the ones that were going to be there to support me. And I think sometimes it's hard to support someone if you're like not in the same city and in the way that I needed to be supported. And that was like definitely in person. So
that makes sense. Yeah. And you know, you come to the bigger city and like this, you know, I can totally relate to that part of just like choosing your family, right? You come to the bigger city, you come from a smaller town, you know, you create your family here because I don't have any family in Toronto.
Yeah.
So I mean, I imagine I don't think you do either.
No.
So, and I think that's the beauty of being alone in a city and not knowing anybody is you get to choose now.
Totally.
Who is going to accept you, because you don't no longer really have to, you know, explain it to people, those people closest to you so much, you know. But you know, obviously, you know, you have to keep on educating.
Totally.
For every like. I imagine you're always telling people, or like, you know, I'm gay, I have HIV. Like, there's always something, right?
And it's hard, like now too, especially because I've been single for, you know, I think 2 years, let's say, and it's just like I feel like every single time I go on a date, it's like becomes this like education opportunity, especially if it's just like a grinder hookup or it's an actual date. It's just like I feel like I'm constantly having to tell people about it, and which is like it's fine now, and I've like made peace with that. But it was super hard in the beginning, you know, because it was almost something that I didn't want to address, and it was me having to like go through it because the first thing that everyone asks is like, "Oh, how did you get it?" And it's like so like I'm like, okay, I'm like teaching you
it's none of your business.
Yeah, like exactly. Like it's just such a like you don't know me and like you want to I don't know, it's just weird and like but then you also don't know about like what it means to be undetectable, but then you're like wanting to know how I got it. I don't know. So it's just like it's such a weird scenario, I feel like going through this, but it's like it literally is. It's just like a constant education opportunity for me, and it always like comes up to like when I talk about my sobriety, because especially if I'm at parties or events, people are like, "Why are you sober?" And I have like such a hard time trying. I don't know. I guess I just haven't come up with another answer to that question because I decided to be sober after I found out that I was HIV positive, and it was sort of like it kind of brought that on. And so I just like now at parties, I just like kind of like have to be like, well, I'm sober because I'm HIV positive, and I feel that it's like important that I like live the like healthiest lifestyle that I can, and that I kind of got a second chance because of modern medicine, and then it's like interesting how much that has to like open up to this like giant group setting conversation of like me educating everyone about HIV, but no,
no, it's constant.
Totally,
you know, it's a constant thing, and the thing is like people don't know how'd you catch it. It's like all you need to know is I'm undetectable. That's all you need to know.
Exactly.
Like, you don't even know how I got it. Like, I just think it's so fucking rude.
It is rude.
You know? But, you know, good for you because you're having to, you know, I'm sure even shut down conversations sometimes because people are so goddamn ignorant.
Totally.
So it's just like, okay, no, we're not going on a date. Okay, I don't want to talk to you because you can just tell.
Yeah.
If how, you know, what somebody's mindset is like towards the issue. So. Um,
Yeah, because I remember when I forget, I'm totally blanking on their name, but it was someone you actually interviewed. And like they were saying about, as soon as they go on a first date with someone, they tell them about their HIV status. And I remember listening to that interview on your podcast and being like, are they crazy? Like I just like I can't even imagine. Like I think I just had so much like my own stigma attached to it that I was so afraid. But it's like honestly that was one of the best pieces of advice because now it's like what I totally do. It's like as soon as I start chatting with someone, I'm like, oh, like just so you know, if it ever gets to this, like I'm undetectable. And because I can't even go on the emotional journey of like dealing with that even like 3 dates in because it's just I feel if I start getting attached to someone, it's just like it's such a like blow to my heart when if that becomes an issue, so
oh yeah, like I mean, it's a relief for you
mm-hmm.
to just say it the first time, and thank goodness most of the time these days it's not people don't think it's a big deal in Toronto,
Yeah.
and because they are educated on it. So I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy that we're we're at we live in a time when you know undetectability has really changed the game
100%.
for people to date and just be themselves and not worry about it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so beautiful, So um, I remember many years ago, I'll just give you a short story.
Mm-hmm.
6 years ago, I was dating this guy, and maybe around 7 years ago. No, it's about 6 years ago. And he was so vulnerable telling me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I started to learn.
How far in were you in this?
We were dating, it was a weekend.
Okay.
And he was so vulnerable, and he's such a handsome man, and he was so vulnerable telling me, he's like, we'll go to my doctors, my doctor will explain to you that there's no risk, and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, I said to him, I said, don't worry about it. It's all good. He's like, what? He's like, it's all good. Like,
Wow.
I know, man. I know what's up. So, like, I'm cool. I feel completely 100% safe. I'm good. And he's just like, it's sort of like just put his heart to rest.
Totally.
And I was happy that I could do that for him. So, what is next for you? Like, what are you up to now? Like, you've been living through this pandemic like the rest of us, and you've been having to do so much, like, from home.
Totally.
So, like, what are you working on right now? What's next for you?
Yeah, well, I think that releasing the video is really sort of the first step for me. I'm just feeling very passionate. I ran a co-owned like fashion magazine for a while, and I just really loved the creative aspect of that. But I was like, how do I've been wanting to do something like that again, but like I think more focused on like helping people, and I think that that's really important for me. Like education is huge, and I love being a public speaker. So I've been like reaching out to a lot of the different like HIV organizations in the city and just like seeing how I can get involved. Now that I feel like I've been able to like publicly come out about my status, it's just like I want to make a bigger, like a broader, a bigger difference and like reach a broader audience. So it's been really cool. I've been chatting a lot with Campfire right now on like kind of different like areas of their organization of like where I can get involved and like kind of help support them. And so it's been really exciting. I've had a few meetings with them so far. So we're cooking up some fun stuff together that I'm like really looking forward to. And I think through that too, it's going to be really great to be able to like create more content just for my own platform, talking more about this in different areas of HIV that I didn't really get to discuss in my first video. So it's kind of been one of my main focuses right now has really been on this. So
Good. I'm really happy to hear that you're doing more of that because, like, I think as well as what we need, in the fashion industry as well, is people to, it's such an industry where, people are a lot of the times creating this facade about who they are. And it's so refreshing to see people being so real and just being, because there are real people in fashion.
Totally.
There are people who are amazing. It's just like, people have these bad experiences, and they sort of paint everybody with this brush. But you're doing the work, and that's exciting because if you're doing the work, there's, hopefully many others who are also trying to do the same work and relate to one another. And,
Absolutely. And I think it'll just be cool to like share more of these types of stories. I hope that this encourages others to like want to be vulnerable. And I hope that like, you know, I can bring more people onto my platform too and like have these types of conversations, you know, and because I think it's, you know, people love the fantasy of of fashion and the creativity behind it, but I think it's important to also talk about the stories behind the photographs. So, yeah,
to talk about the stories, the behind the scenes of our lives, and what
totally.
we're really feeling. You know, well, I think it's amazing, and you know what? I feel like you know, we can do more on this on the show as well to educate
I think that would be amazing.
people as well. So I'm really excited about that. Before we wrap this up,
Okay.
I want you to tell everybody where they can reach you and where they can follow you. And because, you know, obviously there's Instagram, Myles Sexton.
Yes.
Okay. And where else?
I'm super, yeah, I mean, I try to keep everything super consistent. So it's literally at Myles Sexton across every platform, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, my website. I really try to keep it all streamlined. So
MylesSexton.com.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. You guys, thank you so much for joining us here at Queer at Heart. And please stay tuned for the next episode. And please reach me at QueerAtHeartPodcast at gmail.com for any questions, suggestions, and whatever else you guys want to hear on the show. So, Myles, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, man. Really.
This has been amazing. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you for sharing it.